It is Saturday, 30th of May 2020. This is a doom and gloom free zone. There's enough other truth researchers out there telling you about the many ways in which we're all screwed without me needing to add to their number. So this is all about optimism and bright positivity, because that's what I need and that's what my family need right now at this time, and I'm sure it's going to be the same for many people watching this video. So we're told that on Monday, the 1st of June, our overlords, our slave masters, are allowing us to have back some of our freedoms as the lockdown restrictions start to get lifted slowly in the UK. That will be week 11 since the measures first got introduced. So the kids are starting to go back to school as of Monday, and that nice man Boris Johnson, who cares about us so much and just wants to keep us all safe because he's big-hearted like that, big-hearted Boris, has allowed us to meet up to 6 people in public on Monday. Imagine that. What a privilege. We should be so thankful. We're being allowed to see family members or friends of our choosing, so long as it's in an open space like a garden or a park or something like that, and so long as it's up to 6 people. And you know why? Because like I told you last week, this virus is very intelligent. And you know why it's on Monday as well? Because on Sunday it would have you. I mean, if 6 people were meeting on Sunday, they're dead. The virus would be like, shh, I ain't going to get you. I ain't going to get you, bastards. And then we have, the limit of 6 people on Monday, because again, it's very clever and it can count. So if there were 7 people, the virus would be like, shh, I'm going to have you buggers. Yeah. But, up to 6 people, you're going to foil it, because it goes, let's see how many of you bastards there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, shit. I only infect groups of 7 or above. I'm done. I'm out of here. So that's the word. And I've really been reflecting on the role that the mainstream media plays in recent days, because just imagine if none of us ever watched television, ever switched on the radio so-called news, and never bought a so-called newspaper, none of us would have any idea that anything is any different in the world to what it normally is. We'd be going about our business, doing what we always do. We'd be none the wiser. All the mask wearing, all the social distancing bollocks, all the fear and the paranoia of other people has only been cultivated by these treacherous vipers in the mainstream media, perpetuating all the fear-based mind control and the propaganda. Just think about how culpable these criminals are for pushing all these agendas and keeping people in this state, and contributing to all the trauma and all the mental health problems that the lockdown has caused. Without the mainstream media's complicity, those parties behind this Plandemic could never have carried it off. Also in the mainstream media this week, we've had the story coming out of Minneapolis, the George Floyd situation, and the apparent race riots that seems to have sparked in terms of what we're being told. And the city is, in turmoil at the moment. So how much truth there is to that story remains to be seen, because we've got the mainstream media doing what it always does, perpetuating the official version of things. Very interesting timing, very convenient timing for this incident to have come along when it did from the point of view of the overall agenda. Could this be a control system that realises it's entering its death throes, that realises its days are numbered, that realises it's not going to be able to hang on for too much longer, because the lies and the deceptions are becoming clearer every day, and more people are getting wise to them. Again, as I always say, it's not enough, it's not happening quick enough for my liking, but it is happening. This cannot be denied. I've got personal confirmation of the fact that many people have been caused to confront the truth of what really goes on in this world as a result of the events of the last few days. People have been emailing me to personally tell me that members of their family and their close circle of friends that they never thought in a million years would ever wake up and start paying attention are doing just that, because the wheels are starting to fall off. More and more healthcare professionals are coming forward, more and more doctors are coming forward, and incidentally I've got an interview with Dr. Mohammed Adil out of the UK. He's a very rare voice. He's one of the UK doctors that's come forward to blow the whistle on what's really going on with this virus situation and to tell the truth about what a virus really is and how it cannot be spread the way the mainstream media is telling us it can, which makes a complete nonsense of social distancing and all this other madness that's been brought in. So watch out for my interview with Dr. Adil. There's been a lot of doctors out of the United States coming forward, but very few voices from the UK. And this man has already paid the price for stepping forward and speaking up in terms of some of the hassles he's encountered as a result of it. So watch out for that interview soon. So we got the situation in Minneapolis. It's anyone's guess at this stage. It's open to speculation as to whether that is a genuine, organic event or whether it's another of these false flag put-up jobs involving actors. As to how much truth there is to the thing, other researchers will be looking into that in the coming days, no doubt. But yeah, I'm seeing some encouraging signs of the official narrative starting to break down, more and more people questioning it, and we really shouldn't underestimate the impact that the likes of myself and the many other truth researchers putting out information at this time, and there are so many. People making YouTube videos, people making documentaries, people doing podcasts, people posting information online, on blogs, on social media, people getting out there in the street and being active by way of protests and demonstrations. I see there was one in Brisbane, Australia, just yesterday, I think, with a really good turnout. So it's happening all around the world. And people just becoming activists and speaking to people in the street, engaging them in conversation, talking to people in supermarket queues and stuff like this, putting leaflets and resource flyers out to direct people to truth and alternative media outlets. Everyone's been playing a role in this, and we shouldn't underestimate the impact that we may already have had. Something else I've been musing on in recent days is the situation we all find ourselves in might have been a whole lot worse by now if everyone had just complied with it, nobody had bothered speaking up, nobody had bothered challenging the narrative, nobody had put in the effort to research and present alternative takes on what's happening, alternative information. So we could be in a much worse state of tyranny all over the world by now. The lockdowns could have been much more harsh, much more draconian. We could have been much further ahead with the contact track and tracing that they want to roll out and the vaccination program and so many other aspects of this. The 5G could have been accelerated to a much larger degree were it not for citizen journalists and regular everyday people just getting out there and making their contribution in these many different ways. And we've all been inspiring each other. You know, I get a lot of correspondence from people saying your work has motivated me to get up off my arse and do what I can do. And here's what my involvement has been. And they will detail that. And that's great. That's exactly what I and so many other researchers want to hear. The fact that we have inspired other people to get up and do something themselves. The more of us get on this path, the quicker we can put down this invasion on our rights and freedoms, and the quicker we can hopefully expose the lies and the deception and the monumental scam that this whole plandemic has been. So we could be a whole lot worse by now if none of us had been doing anything. And I think there have been occasions in the past where the likes of us getting our heads together, researching and presenting what we find may have prevented something really bad happening. An example that I often use and which others have cited is the London 2012 Olympics. If you think back to the opening ceremony of that event, it was absolutely laden with occult symbology, and it appeared to be playing the part of predictive programming in terms of helping to bring in or foreshadowing some pretty disastrous things for the UK. You might want to look at the work of Rick Clay, the late Rick Clay, this young guy who got into researching that whole thing in the run-up to 2012. He presented his findings. He did a landmark interview on Red Ice Radio, presenting it all. Sadly, Rick died in some fairly unusual and questionable circumstances many years ago now, but he left behind an incredible legacy of work. And if you look at what he had come to discover about the symbolism connected to the 2012 London Olympics, it all seemed to point at plans being in place for some kind of massive false flag ritualistic event. which would have been devastating for the people of this country. And I personally feel that that may well have been prevented by the fact that so many of us got on board beforehand, blew the whistle on it, and made the controllers consider that if they went ahead with what they had planned, it might just become too bloody obvious that it was a put-up job. And people might be directed to all this information that had been put out in the run-up to it, and it might just blow their cover. So I think from time to time they do abandon plans that they had if they feel that it would be too risky for them to continue. They obviously have people assessing these risk situations, probably again coming out of Tavistock, social scientists and psychologists and people that study the mass human psyche and the general public mindset and work out where they think it's at. And you can bet they're watching this current situation like hawks on that front. So I think there's a very strong chance that we may well have prevented things from getting even worse than they would have been. And we've got to keep that effort up. With every passing week, more and more people are getting on board on the side of truth. More and more people are starting to realise that we're being lied to and scammed big time in this whole thing. All of this is regardless of whether there's any validity to the Q/Trump narrative and also the Greg Hallett situation in terms of his claims to now be the rightful King of England. I'm not sure we actually need any more kings and queens. I'm not sure there's any place for any kind of monarchy in 2020. But, these two aspects seem to be tied into each other. We have the news coming from the Q camp. I know a lot of people don't place any stock in that, but whatever your standpoint on it, Donald Trump has been making some interesting moves of late, and he's making them every week now. So on top of the Federal Reserve being merged with the US Treasury and brought out of the hands of a private cartel of bankers, just this last week, Trump signed an executive order giving him control over social media platforms. And I think this one has been largely misconstrued by certain people who have interpreted it as Trump wanting to take over social media platforms and dictate what is put out through them. That's not the way I see it. Trump evidently got very pissed off with Twitter interfering with a couple of his tweets earlier in the week, where they seemed to be challenging what he was putting forward about alleged voter fraud, or the possibility for voter fraud in the American election through the ballots being done by mail only. And Twitter placed under his tweet a notice that this is where you go to get the real facts about mail-in voting. Trump was evidently pretty pissed off at having his tweet interfered with in this way, and he promptly signed this executive order to prevent social media platforms from censoring information. Now, isn't that just what we need? How many complaints have there been from the truth community about our efforts? Videos that we put on YouTube, posts that we may make on Facebook and Twitter, and these types of platforms being censored by these big tech giants. So this executive order is to prevent that kind of censorship from taking place, which has got to be a good thing. There have been other moves as well, and with every passing week, the Greg Hallett situation in terms of his claims that the Queen has ceded her power to him continues. Something has happened with the Queen. She's not there anymore. We can know this. The royal seal, the crest, has disappeared from all the places that it used to be. Someone emailed me just this week saying that they work for the Royal Mail, and they've been told that there's going to be a name change and a change in their crest and their logo coming very soon. What could that involve, I wonder? Removal of the word royal, possibly, and a removal of the royal crest and motto from all these Royal Mail vans and everywhere else that logo appears. Someone also emailed me this week saying that they had a conversation with somebody who works on the inside of British intelligence. I won't give any more details, but this person said that this insider commented that it's common knowledge within those circles that Prince Philip died back in March, but we've not been told about it yet. Obviously I can't verify that. Obviously at this stage it remains hearsay, but it's an interesting comment to have heard somebody make, nevertheless, because Prince Philip, under normal circumstances, would always have received a state funeral, which would have been a big affair involving members of the public turning out. So in the midst of this coronavirus madness, obviously that type of event would not be allowed to take place. So it would be understandable as to why his death, if it had occurred back in March, would not be announced to us yet. In terms of the Queen, though, she seems to have gone. There's no activity at Buckingham Palace. The windows are all boarded up. I know people will say that a refurbishment is taking place because we were told months ago that a refurb was due at Buckingham Palace. That may be what's happening, but either way, she's disappeared from public view, and the mainstream media has warned us that we may not see her out in public ever again. I guess we'll know either way by the point of her Christmas message this year, if she delivers one. But I think there's interesting stuff going on as far as the Queen is concerned, and it's definitely worth keeping an eye on that situation, because that one develops by the week as well. Alright, so whatever the case with Q, if it's a thing, with whatever Donald Trump is doing, with whatever the Greg Hallett situation is, I have never suggested, nor do I suggest now, that any of us ease up on our activism and ease up on our own participation in what needs to take place and our own contributions towards putting truth out, putting obstacles in the path of this tyranny, not complying with our own slavery, resisting the track and tracing, obviously resisting attempts at vaccination, avoiding social distancing nonsense, taking part in all that as far as is within our ability to do so. I've never suggested that we should ease up on any of that. We've got to keep up those measures, keep up the fight. So then, if the Q situation turns out to be nothing, and turns out to be the psyop that many people suspect it is, we're no worse off. We've lost nothing, because we'd have continued doing what we always would have done. But if there turns out to be validity to this situation, then all the efforts that we've been putting in throughout will be a happy bonus on top of all the other positive outcomes that this narrative would present. So either way, we're no worse off. We're doing what we always would have done. I did an interview this week with Shai Danon out of Israel. Actually, I did 2 shows with him. So he came on my Good Vibrations podcast, and he was my guest for episode 160. I linked up with this dude on the Event 202 live stream that we did on the 30th of April. And both of us felt that we had a lot in common. We were really feeling each other's messages and vibing very well. So we made the arrangement to get together and do a couple of shows. So Shai presented some of his insights and some of his wisdom on Good Vibrations, and I really resonated with what he had to say. And then he had me as a guest on his show over on his Ahava 528 YouTube channel. So I'll be posting that in the next day or two. That was me presenting some of my thoughts and my reflections as the guest on his show. So watch out for those. I've ordered a new batch of these t-shirts. T-shirts for all occasions, particularly in these times. Real conversation starters as well. Lots of people that have worn these t-shirts out have told me that it really does get conversations going, and people want to know what you don't consent to, and so you can fill in the blanks and have, you know, a meaningful conversation with them based on these. So I've had a new batch made up, and they're due with me in the next 2 or 3 days. As soon as they're available, if anyone wants to grab one, I'll be posting on my Facebook and on my regular website, markdevlin.co.uk, how you can get hold of these. So I'm going to get the full range of sizes, small, medium, large, XL. And they've proven to be quite popular, actually. The last batch flew out, and people want to get some more. So drop me an email, markdevlinuk@gmail.com, if you want to get hold of one of these t-shirts. What else did I want to mention, lest I forget? Well, that's probably about it. Another point I did want to make, though, is I started the video saying that I don't want this to be about doom and gloom, because every day when I go into my inbox and every day when I look at my Facebook feed, it feels like that's all I'm getting. Just new ways in which our futures are shagged, and new ways in which we're being frog-marched towards complete dystopian nightmares by the day. And again, we would only get this impression and the anxiety and the stressful states of duress in which we find ourselves as a result of listening to that kind of information only comes because we pay attention to it. Like I said at the start, if we didn't pay any attention to any media, mainstream or alternative, none of us would know anything's any different. And it's also worth reflecting that all the nightmare stuff we're hearing about that they're proposing to bring in, if we really look at how it directly affects each of us, we'll probably find that it's very, very minimal, and it will probably continue to be minimal. There will be exceptions to this, and of course, my sympathies go out to anyone that has been affected in a very negative way by all the lockdown restrictions and all the other aspects of this situation. I've not escaped it. I lost my day job. I was a private hire driver before this, driving people to and from airports. That job's gone. It's not coming back. As I mentioned on a previous video, my daughter is suffering severe mental health issues and trauma as a direct result of the isolation caused by the lockdown. So I'm not saying people don't have stories like this, but we hear all the nightmare scenarios being laid out for us about how vaccinations are going to be mandatory, they're going to bring the military in, they're going to be knocking door to door, they're going to be forcing you to undergo tests, they're going to be tracking and tracing you by way of the Bluetooth signal on your phone. And I think the reality will turn out to be that for most of us, we won't have any direct experience of this. We'll get worried about it, we'll get anxious and fearful about the fact that it might happen. But when we look at the odds and the likelihood of it actually happening to any one of us individually, they're very low. And we can spend all this time stressing out about it for, it turns out, nothing. So much of what we're hearing is hype, it is propaganda, it is fear-based mind control. It's devised, again, by these experts that specialise in these dynamics to keep the general public as fearful and therefore as compliant with the regime as possible. So we need to bear in mind that when we find ourselves in these anxious, stressful states, it's on somebody else's say-so, on somebody else's terms. They've made the decision that they want us in these conditions. And so an act of rebellion, a subversive response to that, is to refuse to be kept in that kind of state, and to remember that the way in which we're personally, individually affected by all this stuff they're warning us about, all these nightmare scenarios, is likely to be very minimal. I know we can't go to the pub and the cafe and the restaurant and the gym and the swimming pool and the cinema right now, but those things will surely return in time. They are small inconveniences for us to bear. Things could be a whole lot worse. And as I mentioned earlier, I really do feel that the efforts of us collectively, those of us that care enough, those of us that are paying attention, those of us that don't quake away in our homes wearing masks because we know this whole thing is a put-up job, because we've taken the personal responsibility to do the research to discover this. I think we collectively have prevented a lot of damage which would be in place if all of us had sat back and done nothing. And I think that's a pretty positive achievement that we can all reflect upon, that we've all been a part of. Let's keep that going.